So let's get started. If you didn't have the opportunity to answer our first poll, that's okay. There'll be a couple more. I'm going to share the results with everyone just so you could see why everyone's here today. Seems like most of us are interested in strategies. So that's pretty interesting. Okay. So I'm Erica Lee. I'm Summit School District's Rutgers Mental Health Clinician. And I provide a lot of services within the school district, such as individual therapy, family therapy, group therapy, and consultation. I also do crisis and risk assessments and trainings and workshops for parents and staff like today. Okay, so this workshop, what are we going to do today? So first, I'll give you a brief overview of executive function and an introduction. Then you'll be able to join a breakout group of either elementary, middle, or high school. So if you have a child in multiple school levels, that's okay. We'll be recording the whole workshop so you can revisit the strategies again, and you can watch the different levels if you want to as well. So in those breakout groups, your school counselor and your child studies team member is going to discuss strategies and resources directly relevant to your child and their age level. And then at the end of our interactive workshop, you'll be able to ask questions as needed. Okay, so we're here to understand what comprises executive functioning. There's a lot of different things that go into it, so we're going to discuss some of that today. At the end of this workshop, we hope that you can identify at least 3 areas of executive function, as well as at least 3 strategies to implement with your learner at home. Okay, so we're going to start with a pop quiz. There's 3 questions, and it's going to be just like the first poll. Okay, so I'm going to launch the first one. Okay, so true or false, executive function deficits only occur in people diagnosed with ADHD. All right, I'm getting an overwhelming response for false, and that's right. So it's false. Difficulties with executive function are common in all people, especially adults too, and they can be present regardless of whether or not you have a mental health diagnosis. Okay, the next one is true or false. The pandemic and virtual learning have increased executive function demands on our students. Oh, I must have made this easy. Everyone for true. Perfect. Okay. That's definitely true. Evidence definitely indicates that COVID has initiated more anxiety and stress right now, and that leads to a lot more executive function demands and also leads to some deficits as well. Okay, so our last true or false question. Executive function skills develop until children are approximately age 18. Okay, so I'm definitely getting more of a mix for this one. So this one is actually false. Evidence supports that executive function skills develop until we're actually around age 25. And that doesn't mean that we can't always enhance our executive function skills as adults too. All right, so thank you for participating in that pop quiz. So now we're going to talk about what is executive function. It's kind of compared to the air traffic control system of the brain. So we're getting a lot of messages in where we have to sort them and how we take action regarding those messages. So it lets us kind of set goals, plan, and get things done. And if we're having executive function deficits, we're probably going to struggle in multiple areas of our life, including at school, at work, at home, and even with our relationships. So first, we're going to start with some case studies where we talk a little bit about some difficulties that some of our students might be having. So first will be Jack, and he's in the middle school. He's very bright and he really likes to participate in class, but sometimes he forgets to check his Google Classroom. So he hands in his homework about 50% of the time, unless he's reminded by mom to hand in his homework. Mom's unsure if he's trying to avoid doing his homework or if he really is just forgetting it. And during virtual learning, sometimes you can find him petting his dog and not listening. Then we have Jill. She's a teenager in our high school. She hands in really well-written work when she actually does it, but sometimes she decides to skip class to sleep or to socialize with her friends. When she has a big project due, sometimes she finds herself reorganizing her bio notebook or cleaning her room and not starting that project. Teachers think that she's not motivated to succeed, but then they're confused when she hands in really excellent work. So some of this might sound familiar to you because a lot of our kids experience executive function difficulties in some way related to this. So it's important to go through this and mention COVID, as you know, that's been impacting us for almost a year now. We may have noticed our own executive function skills decline during COVID, as did much of our students. This was inevitable because we're in such a heightened state of stress, no matter how the pandemic affected us. And research has shown that that leads to executive function difficulty. So we may have found even ourselves forgetting things, leaving late, and not being able to plan ahead. So what can we do about this? It's hard, but cutting ourselves some slack is always helpful, as well as realizing the same thing for our kids. Sometimes when we focus on our self-care and really taking care of others emotionally, we might also find that our executive function returns to normal naturally because we feel really cared for and we care for others. It's also important to create habits and routines that can help take the onus off of our brain for some things and make it more automatic that we're doing things, so we don't have to remember things all the time and manage our time as much. So why is executive function important now during virtual and hybrid learning? So right now, our students, they're really being provided with a lot of opportunity to show off their executive function skills. So we want them to be organized, we want them to have their time managed, we want them to get their projects done on time and manage all of their Google Classroom materials. But before the pandemic, we didn't know what was going to happen. So we really didn't give them a lot of direct instruction and guidance on executive function and developing these skills. So right now, we're looking to them to have these skills down pat when we know that they don't develop until they're 25 years old. Okay, so I wanted to highlight some thoughts that our kids might be having, such as, I forgot about the homework, or I'm trying to listen, but I'm really excited for gym class, and relate that to some of our thoughts that we might be having as adults. So during the pandemic, I found myself, getting overwhelmed by Zoom calls and saying, I don't know if I can pay attention during the Zoom call, or, why am I always running late? Or I have a work project that's due in 2 weeks. I'm very overwhelmed. I can't focus on tomorrow. So our kids might be feeling the same way. And we might view it as, they had a social studies project to do. How come they couldn't do it over the weekend? That was the only thing they had to do. But really, they might be thinking, all right, I have this project to do, but I also want to watch this new show. I also want to connect with my friends. I really wanted to play this video game. And that's why I wasn't organized enough to get that done. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is the main executive skills. There are 11 of them, but feel no need to remember them because we're going to go over them again in our breakout groups. We're going to go over specific ones. I just thought it was really important to highlight that there are 11 of them and they all kind of interact. So if some of them are not, if we're having deficits in some of the areas, probably other areas of executive function are going to be affected too. Okay, so the first executive skill is response inhibition. Not just thinking before you act and thinking, if I behave this way, how is that going to affect the situation? So an example of this is, can our younger kids wait for things without being disruptive? Or if we have an older kid who plays soccer and they don't like the call that the ref made, are they going to argue with the ref, or are they going to keep quiet about it and keep playing? Next is working memory. So that's the ability to hold and manipulate information in your mind. You have to draw upon your past learning and apply that to what you're currently learning as well. So the most common example of this we see at school is following directions. So can our younger kids follow a short series of directions? Can our older kids follow directions from multiple teachers as they're switching classes. Emotional control is also a really important executive skill right now too, and not just managing your emotions in order for you to be able to complete your goals. We see some deficits right now with that in regard to test taking and anxiety. If you have anxiety, is it affecting your ability to perform on tests and quizzes? Next is sustained attention. So that's just paying attention, whether or not you're sitting through your Google Class Meet and you're hungry, or you're bored, or you're distracted. That's, can you pay attention for that amount of time? So with our younger kids, that might look like, can they complete a short chore at home if we remind them? And for our older kids, they look like, are they able to sit for an hour or two of homework? Task initiation is the ability to begin projects efficiently without procrastinating. So, can we start a project and meet a deadline without delaying it to do something else that we prefer? Planning and prioritization is the ability to plan to reach that goal. And that can be kind of hard because it involves what's important to focus on and what's not as important. So, if we look at our case study, Jill, from the beginning, she sometimes, when she had a big project to do, she would get things done, such as reorganizing her bio notebook and cleaning her room. But then she wasn't prioritizing what needed to be done first, which was the big project that she had to do. Organization is just that ability to create and maintain systems to organize your materials and organize information. And that's more important than ever right now, especially with hybrid learning. Sometimes you have to bring some things to school, sometimes you have to leave them at home. We know if we forget our Chromebooks on a day that we're at school, we might really feel disorganized. So that's really important for learning right now too. Time management is complicated. There's a lot that goes into that as in itself, which is estimating how long you have to complete something, how much time you should allocate to each part, and then staying within those time limits and deadlines. Even as adults, sometimes at work, I'm sure we find ourselves asking for increase on deadlines. It's a hard thing to manage. So for a child, that might look like, if we say you have 10 minutes to brush your teeth, are they able to kind of take note of that time and complete that task? For an older kid, that might look like, are they able to complete homework or an assigned deadline, but by midnight when it's due? Goal-directed persistence is the ability to have a goal, follow through, and complete that goal without getting distracted. So for our little kids, that might look like, you can earn playtime if you make your bed, and then being able to make their bed without getting distracted and doing other things. For our teenagers, that might look like something like, they want to buy a car and they have to save their money for it. Sure, there's other things they might want to spend money on, but are they able to be persistent and reach their goal of buying that car? Flexibility is the ability to revise your plans if you make a mistake or if there's a setback or a change in schedule. For our little kids, that might look like, if the schedule changes in class, are they going to be able to adapt to that without getting too overly distressed? And for our older kids, that might look like kind of the same. If they make a mistake, are they able to cope with that without getting overly distressed? If they get their second choice job instead of their first choice, are they able to, be disappointed, but also be flexible and overcome that? And our last executive function skill is metacognition. And that's the ability to think about your thinking and kind of take a bird's eye view and look at yourself in a situation. Observe, how did you do? It involves self-monitoring, self-evaluating, and asking yourself, how am I doing right now? How did I do? So for a younger child, this might look like being able to adapt your behavior in the face of feedback. So if an adult tells you stop, are you going to be able to think about, oh, okay, they're telling me stop. Why don't I stop? Or for a teenager, this might look like something like revising your essay and thinking, okay, this paragraph is good, but I think I could make it better. So I wanted to provide some strategies that definitely incorporate a lot of executive function at home. One of my favorites here is planning a meal together. This can be done with our students of all ages. And it involves a lot more than one executive function skill. If you're planning the meal, you're getting the ingredients, you're measuring it, you're seeing how many people you need to cook for, and then actually enjoying the meal. Another one that I think is important is talking about goals with our students. So I think that we often have a lot of goals for our students, but sometimes we don't talk about them with them and they don't know that we have those goals for them. So I think it's important to have that session with them and kind of talk about what we want them to accomplish, what they want to accomplish, maybe posting those goals on the wall somewhere at our house. Also, having goals for ourselves and showing them how we accomplish them can be important too. Okay, so next we're going to be heading into our breakout groups and we're going to be doing, you're going to have to click on the Zoom link that you want. It should be pasted into the chat and I'll send it again. If needed, I can also stay here and I can help. Just unmute yourself if you can't figure it out and I can try to help you with that too. I'll be here to help you sort into those breakout groups.